joined by the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Let's talk about the weather quickly, should we? Any concerns from the government overnight with what's going on?
Well, obviously, it's very concerning for residents across the country. You know, if they have any concerns, they should ring 105. But
what does that do? 105?
So that's if
Never heard that before.
Yeah, that's if you're concerned about your network. Obviously, network operators are looking at these issues across the country.
OK. I'm reading this morning, front page of the Times, that thousands of parents have been warned that they'll be unable to access the government's offer of free childcare this year because of problems with its introduction. What's going on there?
Well, you're right. We have brought in a massive childcare policy to ensure that more parents have access to childcare, a flagship policy which is going to help people across the country. I note that there have been some concerns, and I understand that those will be resolved. I think there's a
in time.
I believe so.
It's only
yes.
3 months to go, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. I think there was some issue in relation to people who are already claiming tax-free benefits in relation to the childcare, but a temporary fix is being established, and so parents won't need to do anything at all.
So just to clarify, there's a bit of a problem, but you will have sorted it out and keep your promise by April.
Yeah, my understanding is that it will be fixed.
OK. I also understand that you have been able to look at Jason's piece on Rochdale and the fact that it would appear that an officer has stepped down because she feels that a paedophile ring still operates in Rochdale. What should be done about it?
This is really, really terrible news, very, very important issue. We must, of course, look after our children. I understand that these issues were raised last week and there is an investigation in relation to this. Obviously, the police are operationally independent from government, so I understand that this is being investigated.
I mean, it's terrible that
terrible.
Something like this happened many years ago. We heard from Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, along with the head of Greater Manchester Police last week. They said it's all sorted. We've got a whistleblower talking to our Jason Farrell who says that it isn't.
This is absolutely terrible, and as I said, there's an investigation ongoing. And I'm sure the responsible department will be looking and following this carefully. The police, as I said, are operationally independent, but these sorts of things should absolutely not be happening.
OK. Talk to me about the Royal Mail. I'm reading that Ofcom, who you work closely with, may suggest that the Royal Mail makes deliveries every other day and not at all on Saturdays. How does the government feel about that?
Well, that's an issue that obviously the Royal Mail will have to be discussing with the relevant department.
It will, but Ofcom is suggesting that that is a possibility. We were hearing a little bit earlier on, in fact, my colleague was saying it's more than just delivering letters. It's about checking on old people, making sure that they're OK, perhaps conversations that they wouldn't have otherwise. Are we content that the Royal Mail goes down to deliveries of every other day, like they do in Europe, actually? Quite a few countries in Europe do that.
No, I think the Royal Mail provides an excellent service in terms of, one that we all rely on across the country, and we know that, those letters and parcels are absolutely critical. But the issue of, how long they're going to deliver, when they're going to deliver, that's not an issue for me and my department.
OK, so you wouldn't be concerned if it was reduced to every other day?
Well, I think people across the country will be concerned about that. But I'm sure there are many factors that have got to be taken into account, and that's not something I personally have been looking at.
No, but you have a view, don't you? I mean, you're a member of the public as well, and you get your post every day at the moment. The suggestion is it'll be every other day. Would that cause you any problems, challenges, or are you more of an email person?
Well, I think we all get our news and our deliveries and communications from others in a whole range of ways. I know that this will be troubling for some people, but as I said, this isn't something that I'm looking at in my department. OK,
what you are looking at is the BBC and whether or not they are as impartial as they might be online. Which other outlets are you also looking into?
Well, what you're talking about is a mid-term review that we've published today. And what that is about is the fact that although the BBC is the most fantastic public institution, it's really important that the public maintains its trust in it. And what we've heard from audiences is that some people think it's biased. Some people think that their complaints aren't heard. Well, what I've looked at is the evidence. And the evidence from Ofcom is that 39% of complaints last year were in relation to impartiality, whereas the previous year they were 19%. So there is a perception amongst audiences that
But
the
perception
BBC
isn't necessarily reality.
Well, there are only perceptions, and perceptions are important. What's important about the BBC is that it's funded by the public. So the perceptions of audiences, of the public, are important. And although it's a trust in the BBC in terms of accuracy are good, in terms of impartiality, audience faith in the BBC has gone down. And so that's why we have published today, having worked with the BBC, a number of measures to enhance impartiality and also in relation to strengthening independent scrutiny of complaints, which is really important because if audiences want to complain about the BBC, they should feel like they're being heard.
Do you think the BBC is biased?
Well, I am looking at this from the point of view of the Culture Secretary.
Yeah,
and
that's why I'm asking you.
And,
so do you think they're biased?
And the evidence shows that there is a perception of bias in relation to the BBC.
What do you think? Do you think, as Culture Secretary, that the BBC is biased? I
think that on occasion it has been biased, yes.
In relation to what?
Well, this report isn't about incidents, but we have seen recently that it's had to apologise for its own reporting, for example, in relation to the attack in the hospital in Israel, so in Gaza.
What's the difference between mistake and bias, surely?
Well, there is a perception amongst the public that the BBC is biased, and as Culture Secretary, it's important that I look at that. I must say, these are issues that I have discussed with the BBC. They've taken on board.
Yeah, but I'm asking you about the evidence of bias. Where's the evidence?
The evidence of bias is what audiences believe is the content of the BBC and
but that's
how
perception,
they...
That's not evidence. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evidence. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC, and the evidence in relation to that perception is that...
perception and evidence are different things.
The evidence from Ofcom, having done studies and questionnaires of the public, is that the BBC's ratings in relation to impartiality have gone down. And I and the BBC think that there is more that the BBC can do in order to improve that.
Which other broadcasters are you investigating? Which other broadcasters do you feel potentially are not impartial?
The reason we've done this review is because the BBC is in a special position.
Yeah, but I'm asking you which other broadcasters you think are not impartial.
My job as the Culture Secretary is to... It has a special role in relation to the BBC, and the reason for that is because the BBC is funded by the public.
I understand that, but I'm asking you whether you think other broadcasters might not be impartial.
Well, other broadcasters, I must say with respect, are in a totally different position to the BBC because they're not funded by the public.
Still need to be impartial.
Because they're not governed...
According to the Ofcom code.
Yes, but the BBC is in a particular position for two reasons. One, it is funded by the public, and second, it is governed by a charter. And the reason we've done this review is because it was set out a number of years ago that between charter reviews, there's an 11-year period between charter reviews, there should be a mid-term review. That's what this is. I haven't suddenly decided one day to do a review of the impartiality.
No, I understand that, but I'm asking you about other broadcasters and whether they're also impartial.
So all broadcasters, as you say, who choose to be governed by Ofcom,
which
have rules in relation to impartiality, and Ofcom regulates those and looks very closely at those rules in relation to impartiality. But it's very different to the BBC.
OK, we're out of time, unfortunately. It's good to see you as always.
Thanks very
so much indeed for joining us.